Macho John Madden, they call me Juanito in Mexico, where I recently lived for 2 years. And it's just about 4 blocks in that direction. I'm in Brownsville, Texas, sitting on the stoop of my little apartment building, right across the street from the bus stop. About 4 in the morning on the 3rd of July, which is the day we're celebrating the nation's history. It's a national holiday today because tomorrow's Saturday. I want to tell a story about, at almost age 80, my 2 big rounds of forgiving America and coming home. I was an anti-Vietnam War protester, diehard, maced and tear-gassed at the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968. That's what kind of radicalized me. And me and my wife Sandy, who were not doing well with each other, moved to Nova Scotia, Canada, in 1974 or 5. We adopted a child up there who was born in December of 75. I was of the generation of young people who was influenced by Ram Dass, Richard Alpert, to turn from drugs to meditation. And my first meditation teacher path was transcendental meditation. I never really felt like the Maharishi was my teacher, but I had a couple good years there. But I was looking for a real teacher. Shortly before we went to Nova Scotia, because I had gotten a psychology job up there, and the same weekend I went up and closed on that job, she got a job in the schools in Spring Hill, which is a neighboring town. My mental health center served Amherst and Spring Hill. Spring Hill is famous for Anne Murray Christmas specials back in the day, and for famous mine disasters, coal mine disasters. I think Peter, Paul, and Mary sang, "In the town of Spring Hill you don't rest easy. Often the earth will tremble and roll. When the earth it trembles, miners die. Money and blood is the price of coal. Money and blood is the price of coal." But before we moved, I went to a yoga retreat. We were living in Alfred, New York, where I was teaching at the university there. I went to a yoga retreat near Buffalo. The head of that retreat center was known, Ken Pillar. That name just popped in my head. I'm pretty sure that was his name, Ken, P-I-L-A-R. Was famous as a psychic. I had never been there. He had never met me. As I walked through the door, he said, "You're going on a long trip. You're going to meet your teacher." Sure enough, that happened. The first week in Amherst, I saw Amherst was not a hub for New Age spirituality or Eastern spirituality by any means. But there was a poster on some bulletin board I saw for Sri Chinmoy meditations over in Halifax, which was 3 hours away. I went, had a stunning experience and terrifying. Never had I surrendered to a spiritual teacher before, but I did, and had 3 wonderful years. Now, Sri Chinmoy had come to the U.S. from Bengal, India, and lived in Jamaica, Queens, New York, and led meditations every week at the United Nations, and really believed in the promise of America. So the Sri Chinmoy Center in Halifax was going to have a big celebration for the 1976 bicentennial. And Jim, whose spiritual name was Utpal, those names just came back to me this morning after we're talking a long time ago, 50 years ago, called me over in Amherst and said, "John, you're our resident American. We need you to be here for our big Sunday celebration for the bicentennial." I said to him honestly, "Jim, no, I'm not the guy. I'm heartsick over America. I've lost faith completely in America." Big regional bus. Their local buses go out of this terminal, and the far terminal has regional buses that serve Mexico and all cities in the U.S., really. Said, "Jim, no, leave me out." And Jim leaned in and preached to me for half an hour on the phone about the heart and soul of America, and I was stunned. Stunned into silence, which for this extrovert is a big deal. And went out. We lived on the Bay of Fundy, highest tides of the world, a little cottage that we had found in a very magical way in Lower Cove outside of Joggins, a big fishing village. I went down and sat by the ocean and cried and cried and cried and cried and forgave America. And a year later we moved back to the U.S. Sandy went to grad school in Syracuse for special ed. Now, most recently, my abandoning of America involved moving to Mexico. I spent 9 months here in the Rio Grande Valley from the fall of 22 to the spring of 23, and on March 13th of 23 I crossed into New Mexico and spent 2 of the happiest years in my life down there. Finally, in March of 25, got super sick with renal failure, and a couple months later was flown back by the U.S. consulate who helped me. I had to pay for the plane ticket, but they greased all the skids for me to go back to Asheville, North Carolina, where I had been living and knew the medical system for treatment. And was back there 9 months, hungry, desperate to get back to Mexico, crying almost every day for how much I missed Mexico. And finally, when I wasn't in hospitals and rehab centers, I didn't have the money to afford apartments in Asheville because I have a kind of a medium Social Security check. And I had been 3 months in the Salvation Army shelter there, which was pretty decent shelter, in some ways quite good. And when my 3 months were up and I couldn't afford an apartment, I was about to be back on the street, Elizabeth, the manager of that place, said, "You want to go back to Mexico? We'd buy you a ticket to Mexico. You want to get a bus ticket to Mexico?" I said, "I'm in, let me go." And they actually paid as far as Houston, and I had to pay the rest. The second attempt to settle in Mexico didn't go as well. It was poorly thought out, and I wasn't really in a very centered place. So that went up in flames, and May 8th, I returned to the U.S. I arrived here in Brownsville. And it's been a gradual process of rebuilding, including 3 weeks in hospitals for cellulitis, bad infection in my legs. But Brownsville is where the Rio Grande River empties into the Gulf of Mexico, thank you. And one of the first 2 crossings I made into Mexico were both illegal. I swam across the Rio Grande River at Boca Chica Beach, which is about 30 miles east of us here, and walked up to a group of Mexican guys on the other side, the Baghdad beach in Mexico, and said, "Necesito uno pasaporte?" "Do I need a passport?" Oh God, these gringos are so crazy. Never have we seen a guy swim across to our side. But now I'm, more than ever in my life, I have a feeling I'm in the right place at the right time, because Brownsville is ground zero for immigrant rights work in the U.S. It is the meeting place of Latin and gringo cultures. In San Antonio, I understand, is quite good. But I think there's no place in the U.S. where brown meets white as well as in this town. And I assumed that because Mexicans have been on this side of the border, many of them for 5, 6, 7 generations, long before it was the U.S., that it's been good for a long time. But a good friend of mine at the local health center where I'm doing a lot of my doctoring was telling me a story that his dad, my friend is Daniel Garcia, his dad grew up at a time when Mexican kids were not allowed to speak Spanish in the schools in Brownsville, so racism was alive and well very recently. But now the 2 races do very, very well overall. And I'm going to go to a big party here in Brownsville. They do First Friday 3 times in the summer. And my first night out of the hospital, I went last month. And it's a big party, and it's apparently going to be much bigger this time because it's a holiday and everybody's got off from work. So I'm looking forward to that a lot. And I'm looking forward big time Sunday night to what may be Mexico's last soccer match in the World Cup. That'll be thrilling to watch that here. 90% Latinos here. And many of them stunningly wonderful people. I adore that culture. And so because I get to be in Brownsville And I get to have Latin culture and keep practicing my Spanish and be around so many gorgeous people. And lots of English speakers here. I ran into many places in Mexico where I was the only English speaker, and that was hard. And being sick in Mexico was very hard. And here I get to use my Medicare card, and I'm on the verge of getting Medicaid also. And the healthcare system is very good. I spent a lot of time in hospitals back in Asheville, and now 3 weeks in hospitals here. And the difference is stunning. The hospitals were good, and the people who took care of you, the nurses and aides and OT and rehab therapists, were wonderful. But the level of teamwork is seamless among the Latinos. And the sweetness and the lovingness that they have towards their charges is gorgeous. And one of my big professional projects right now is I'm putting together a course on healing for healers to help them be high impact with the people they work with, but also take really, really good care of themselves. And all the nurses and the physical therapists that I talk to, they all say, that's good, that's hot, do that, that's a good thing. So I'm happy to be in the United States. I just had a rap with one of my housemates here who's a good man, but imprisoned in some huge disinformation about this country because I tried to talk to him about the meaning of the big birthday. And we don't see it the same at all. We agreed to disagree. There's so much disinformation. The country is at a very, very precarious and dangerous and scary place. But with some wonderful leaders, and especially in Texas, Jim Tallarico, who's running for the Senate, is stunningly wonderful, young, 37-year-old man. And I was watching a video last night by Gina Hinojosa, who's running for governor, and she's spectacular Latina. And so it's in some ways a very exciting place to be in Texas. They've got me, I've spent a couple of years in Texas with my travels, Galveston, Corpus Christi, lots of places, South Padre Island. Wonderful, gorgeous places with beautiful people. And I've told so many young people, get out of Texas, learn that there's a whole other world out there. But Texas could soon be another world if we get some better political leaders. I'm happy, I'm grateful, blessed, and happy to be in Texas. I didn't know I'd ever say that. Okay, happy birthday, America.